Picture this. You are standing literally on the edge of the world. There's a biting, howling Arctic wind just pushing against your face, and you are looking out over this absolutely massive, unforgiving expanse of white. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a high-stakes, real-world geopolitical thriller. It's a story of global superpowers, a frantic scramble for trillion-dollar resources, and an island caught right in the absolute middle of the whole shebang. We're diving into the battle for Greenland.
In Greenland, local hunters have a very specific, incredibly powerful word. Sikuk Nitsok. It translates to a sea with no ice. And, it's a word that strikes a deep, visceral fear into the hearts of the people who actually live there. See, the Arctic is currently warming 2 to 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. And as this terrifying reality unfolds, the melting ice is exposing something else entirely. It's exposing a massive landmass that the world's most powerful nations suddenly, desperately want to claim.
And that warming reality? Well, it led directly to a stunningly blunt demand. On December 22, 2024, U.S. President Donald Trump posted that ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity, questioning Denmark's sovereignty and pointing to U.S. national security. And wow, it's a statement that sent absolute shockwaves across the globe, abruptly forcing what was a massive, quiet conflict right out into the open.
Chapter 1. The Battle for Greenland.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the modern geopolitical tug-of-war happening over this island right now is incredibly complex. It is not just some diplomatic spat, it's a profound collision between global superpower ambitions and the actual people who call this land home. To really wrap your head around the sheer scale of this dynamic, you just have to look at this number: 57,000. Geographically, Greenland is absolutely enormous. It's roughly the size of Western Europe. Yet its entire population is just 57,000 inhabitants. That is a tiny population now caught in the crosshairs of a massive global chess match, basically holding the keys to what many outside powers view as an untouched El Dorado.
And this brilliantly illustrates what's going on. You essentially have two completely opposing forces here. On one side, you've got the superpower fantasy, right? Foreign nations looking at Greenland as this ultimate strategic, military hub and a resource piggy bank just waiting to be cracked open. But on the flip side is the Greenlandic reality. When the U.S. president floated the idea of buying Greenland, the Danish prime minister famously called the whole idea absurd. But for the locals themselves, it's really about their deep, unwavering desire for independence and actually controlling their own home.
Chapter 2. History of Strategic Value.
But to truly grasp why this is all exploding right now, we kind of have to rewind a bit. Washington's intense fixation on Greenland isn't just some recent phenomenon. It actually long predates our current political administrations and is deeply, deeply rooted in global military strategy. In fact, the United States has been eyeing this territory since the 1860s. The real shift, however, happened during World War II. Back in 1941, a defense agreement allowed the U.S. to set up military bases there. Fun fact, weather reports from Greenland were absolutely crucial for planning the D-Day operations in Europe. And then, as the Cold War kicked off, Greenland's strategic value just absolutely skyrocketed for one very specific reason.
Jens Heinrich, the head of Greenland's representation in Copenhagen, points out this really chilling geographic reality. He notes, if you want to fire a nuclear missile from the US to Russia, the shortest route is over the Arctic and over Greenland. Because of that terrifying math, the US built a massive network of radar stations, including the Thule Air Base, which is now known as Pitafik. And today, it remains an absolutely vital cornerstone of the U.S. anti-missile shield and satellite surveillance network.
Chapter 3. The Rare Earth Gold Rush.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the battle isn't just about the airspace above Greenland anymore. Nope, there is a multi-billion-dollar fight happening right beneath the melting ice over these 43 minerals. We are literally entering a modern-day gold rush, and the stakes for the global economy honestly could not be higher. See, the U.S. government categorizes 60 minerals as critical for things like green technology, electric vehicles, and the defense industry. And get this, an estimated 43 of those 60 minerals can be found right here in Greenland's subsoil. With China tightening its export rules on rare earth minerals, Western powers are desperately looking at Greenland as their ultimate backup plan.
But actually extracting those minerals? Yeah, it's incredibly complicated. Let's look at the deposits at Quainersut, down in the south of Greenland. So an Australian mining firm, backed by Chinese minority shareholders, wanted to mine rare earth elements there. The catch? The deposit also contains uranium. Naturally, locals were terrified of radioactive waste blowing into their oceans and completely destroying their farming and fishing livelihoods, so they fiercely resisted. And the government ultimately passed a law that banned uranium mining completely. In response to that, the mining companies slapped the Greenlandic government with a massive $11 billion lawsuit. It's a total standoff.
Chapter 4. The Fight for Independence. And this brings us to the deeply human cost of this whole geopolitical scramble. Because while the superpowers are out there talking about military bases and billion-dollar lawsuits, the people of Greenland are fighting an entirely different battle. One aimed at healing some really painful colonial scars and breaking free from Denmark. This number represents a truly heartbreaking historical trauma. Back in the 1960s, the Danish healthcare system realized the birth rate in Greenland was rising. And their solution? It was devastating. Without any public transparency, and often without any consent at all, they administered IUDs to roughly 4,000 Greenlandic females. Some of these girls were literally as young as 12 years old. It was a deeply, deeply traumatic campaign to systematically control the indigenous population.
It took decades, but the Danish Prime Minister finally issued an official apology for this horrific injustice, stating, "Forgive us for what was taken from you, and for the pain it caused." It is exactly this kind of dark history that fuels Greenland's burning, unwavering desire to completely control their own destiny today.
So, despite the sudden influx of all these foreign powers and despite American MAGA hats suddenly appearing on the streets of Nuuk, the vast majority of locals are demanding self-determination. They don't want to be Danes, they don't want to be Americans, they want to be Greenlanders. Even knowing the massive economic hurdles of funding their own independent country, they want to be the ones at the steering wheel of their own development.
Chapter 5. The Geopolitical Chessboard.
Okay, let's piece this together. You have a local population fighting for independence, sitting right on top of the world's most critical minerals. At the exact same time, the ice blocking the shipping routes is melting away. Let's zoom back out for a second and look at the chaotic global power struggle that has descended on these newly accessible Arctic waters. Because as the ice vanishes, the militarization of the Arctic is accelerating fast. Russia believes the Arctic is their domain, so they're reopening Soviet-era bases and deploying submarines. China, meanwhile, has integrated the far north into its Polar Silk Road strategy to get economic and security footholds. And, sensing all this instability, Europe is stepping up. French President Emmanuel Macron visited Nuuk in a very clear show of European solidarity, as EU nations start conducting joint military exercises in the region, basically fearing they can no longer rely solely on the US.
Which leads us to this really chilling question. Will the international order be overturned? See, Russian President Vladimir Putin recently taunted the West by saying, "Yes, you can have Greenland," reacting to the US president's ambitions. And experts are warning that this is a wildly dangerous game, because if great powers start normalizing simply taking whatever territories they want, treating actual borders like poker chips, it threatens to completely overturn the peaceful, democratic international order we've had in place since World War II.
Chapter 6. The Trillion-Dollar Ice.
So, the crucial point is this. As we reach the end of this explainer, we actually need to pull a complete 180 here. Because while the politicians are arguing over radar stations and rare earth minerals, they are completely missing the true apocalyptic stakes. The world is so incredibly distracted by the riches beneath the ice, but geoscientists are frantically waving their arms, trying to tell us that the true value of Greenland is the ice itself. Keeping that ice frozen, on land, and out of the ocean is literally the single most important factor for the stability of our entire planet.
If Greenland's massive ice sheet melts and slips off the landmass into the ocean, global sea levels will rise by up to 7 devastating meters. 7 meters! We are already seeing the permafrost melt and houses literally sink into the ground in Greenland. But a 7-meter rise globally, that completely, fundamentally rewrites the map of the Earth.
And here is the absolutely devastating climax of this entire story. If that ice melts, an estimated 500 million people worldwide will be displaced. 500 million? Entire nations, like the Maldives, will just simply sink beneath the waves. The economic losses will run into the many, many trillions of dollars. It is a true, unimaginable global tragedy just waiting to happen.
So I'm going to leave you with this haunting thought. We spend so much time worrying about geopolitical borders and migration today. But if 500 million people suddenly have to pick up and move because the oceans have literally swallowed their homes, what happens to this world? The battle for Greenland isn't just about who gets to control an island. It is, quite literally, about the survival of humanity's coast.